let's take a look at a Derby County transfer update then. As we head into day 3 of the January transfer window, let's take a look at all the latest news and transfer reports that are heading our way. Now, first off, let's talk about the players currently in the building. There is reports suggesting that Ben Brereton-Diaz could be heading to Brazil or Canada, as he could potentially join up with Corinthians or Toronto FC. There's been a lot of talk about Ebou Adams recently, with Luton Town and Sheffield United rumoured to be interested in the Gambian central midfielder. We look then at Curtis Nelson, who hasn't been involved in the most recent game for Derby County. Could a loan move be on the cards for him? And then we look at Ryan Nyambe, another player who's not quite had the game time under John Eustace. A potential move could be on the cards there. Now, this is the Derby Digest. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. Check out all the socials down in the description. And if you haven't checked out my other channels, make sure you do that as well. Now, while we're talking about outgoings, let's do a bit of incomings. Derby County announced the signing of Oscar Frullo yesterday on a deal until the summer of 2029. The 22-year-old Danish midfielder signs for a fee believed to be in the region of around £400,000, with a deal that could rise up to £1 million. However, we'll wait for official confirmation on that. Derby County are also supposedly linked with a move for Jack Diamond, currently playing for Stockport County. There's also a move potentially ongoing for USA international left back George Ballo, who is currently playing in Austria for LASK, who are just a few points ahead of that of Max Johnston's former team, Sturm Graz. Now, Oladipo Afalan is a player who Derby County are rumoured to be targeting as well. The former Bolton attacker could be finding his way to Derby County over the course of the next few weeks. Now, there is some rumours regarding the likes of Lars Jørgen Selverson potentially having a deal on the way to Germany, but I think that would require a lot of moves for Derby County. Now, let's assess the situation and all of those rumours that I have just discussed. Now, in terms of Ben Brereton-Diaz, I think it's really important that we do discuss this one. Over the course of his entire loan spell at Derby County, he's not quite put in the performances or been anywhere near the player that many Derby County fans anticipated that he would be. We all knew it wasn't the same Diaz that moved to Villarreal a couple of years ago. I'm pretty sure it was Villarreal. We'll check that though, because it just wasn't the same. It wasn't the same guy. It just wasn't. And we knew that coming in. He struggled. Well, he didn't struggle at Sheffield United. He was a big part of that team, but he just wasn't the same player. And I think with the reports that are going around at the moment with Ben Brereton-Diaz, there's a potential move to the MLS on the cards to join Toronto FC in Canada. There's a potential move to Brazil to join up with Corinthians, which, don't get me wrong, both of those moves would be absolutely incredible for Diaz, as he'd get to play, in my opinion, in a much lower pressured situation, especially in the MLS. Maybe not so much with Corinthians, but definitely with Toronto, where you don't have to worry about relegation. You don't have to worry about too much, really. And I think that they could be good moves for him to sort of rebuild his career. However, obviously, it sort of takes him out of the limelight and potentially getting another opportunity to play in the Premier League. Now, as we discussed Diaz, do I think he will move? I think it's a deal that potentially could happen. I think he's a very, very good player, but I think when you look at the way he's performed for Derby County, he's just not quite the man that we need. Now, in terms of replacing him, that's probably where like the Jack Diamond links come from. It's probably where the link for Oladapo Afalan comes from, where you sort of look at who can come in and play as one of the 10s in a front three in a 3-4-3, who can play also as a 9 in a front 2, who can play as a 10 in a sort of 3-5-2 formation. And I think Diaz can play all of those roles. Afalan potentially could, and you look at Jack Diamond, can certainly play as a 10, can certainly play on the right of a front 3. So I think that is where those moves come from. Now, on to Ebou Adams, a player who could potentially be leaving Derby County this January window. He's obviously contracted until 2027. I think a lot of people hold a lot of sentiment towards Ebou Adams, which I completely understand. He's been a huge part of Derby County over the course of the last, 18 months to 2 years. And he was a big part of the reason we got promoted, a big part of the reason why we stayed up last year with his defensive contributions. But I think as a football club, we need to be looking forwards. And at some point, as I always say, there's no sentiment in football, there's no loyalty in football. Now, the reports in regards to Ebou Adams are both Luton Town and Sheffield United. They're the two teams that I've seen reported potentially interested in a move for him. And if I'm completely honest, if if an offer comes in, I would be happy to let him go, especially now with the introduction of Oscar Frulo. We've got David Ozo coming back in a couple of weeks as well. So I think we'd be in a much better position without him. I completely understand his defensive contributions are magnificent for Derby, but I think we've got to be very open and honest about the situation as we look to progress to potentially being sort of a playoff setup next year, which we can't do with Ebou Adams, in my personal opinion. I don't think Ebou Adams will ever sort of hit that level, in my personal opinion. Now, let's discuss Curtis Nelson. I said a couple of weeks ago that I thought he was sort of brought on the pitch a couple of times and put in the shop window, essentially, for Derby County. Now, as of time of recording, which is the 2nd of January at 12:48, Curtis Nelson hasn't obviously moved anywhere. He wasn't involved in the squad for the game against Middlesbrough. I can't remember if he was involved against Leicester, but obviously we know what Curtis Nelson can do. He's 32 years of age. I believe his contract expires this summer, although I know there was an extension clause. Now, obviously, with doing his ACL, having such a difficult 2025, I personally would anticipate that Curtis Nelson will move on to pastures new during January. If not in January, he definitely will in the summer, in my personal opinion. Now, a player who I haven't yet discussed is Caden Jackson, because I completely forgot until I was discussing it now. So let's discuss Caden Jackson, who is reportedly linked with a move to Lincoln City on loan until the end of his contract, which is in the summer, at which point Lincoln City can decide if they want to take him on permanently or if he chooses to go elsewhere. Now, obviously, he's played a fair few times this season, and I think we all know he's not quite what Derby County need. He's not quite what Derby County want. Now, he was decent for a period last season, but really struggled to create chances, score goals, and I think that's what we needed. And I think you look at the introduction of the likes of Ryan Brewster, you look at the introduction of Patrick Agimang, and even Diaz. Although Diaz hasn't been good enough, I'd rather have Diaz on the pitch than Caden Jackson. You look then at a player like Bobby Clark playing in that 10 role. It sort of changes the landscape of the forward line for me. Now, do I think that Caden Jackson is good enough to play for Derby County? Not necessarily. I think it definitely is a move that is definitely in the right region of being discussed for me. Now, do I think he'll go anywhere? I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to wait and see. But let's now discuss Ryan Nyambe. Now, Nyambe, 28 years old. His contract expires next summer in 2027. And I just don't know where he fits in Derby County's current setup in that back three, because he's not a wing back for me. He doesn't have the attacking impetus that the likes of a Joe Ward or a Max Johnston could have, and I don't really think he's ever going to get in the team over a Sondre Langas at right centre half. And I don't think he's a better centre-half than the players we've already got in that position. You look at someone like Danny Bart, you look at someone like Craig Forsyth who can step in there. Obviously, Max Johnston can play as a right-sided centre-half as well. I just don't quite think Nyambe is necessary. Now, I haven't spoke about in this video is Jake Rooney returning from Barnsley, which I'm not surprised about. He's barely played, but that obviously, again, is a player who can play in those roles. So there's a lot of moves that need to be discussed for Derby County. Now, we have to be very open and honest about the situation, and that is that Derby County are looking to improve, and they're going to do that by any means necessary. Now, there is rumours regarding Lars-Jørgen Selvison. However, I don't anticipate him to move. If that changes, I will discuss it. You look then at the rest of the squad. Obviously, Sanderson signed on a permanent. Oscar Frulo's been added to the squad, but he won't be able to play for a couple of weeks. So we're in a good position, really. Now, there is a left-back by the name of George Ballo, who is being linked. He is a current USA international. He's got 7 caps to his name, playing for LASK in the same league that Max Johnston came from. Now, he's rumoured to be worth about £1.5 million. It'd be wonderful for Derby County to get that deal done. 23 years old, international winger, playing in the top division in Austria, battling for the title. Be good to see what happens with that one. Now, obviously, you can let me know your thoughts on all of this down in the comments if you have not done so already. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.